Hello everybody, it's Tommy and welcome back to another speed build for the Disney Save. Today we're going to be working on our second Aladdin themed build for Oasis Springs, our brand new world for the Disney Save. If you missed the first build, I highly recommend that you go and check that out first. You're going to see some little peeks of it here and there because it's the lot right across from this one. It is the Agrabah marketplace from the Aladdin film, and it's super detailed and pretty and has so many buildings and activities and stalls and all sorts of things going on. So definitely check that one out first and come back here to watch this because this is kind of like a part two. So what I'm making today, I'm calling this Aladdin's Rental. It doesn't really have a name quite yet. I usually base naming in the Disney Save on songs from Disney. So I was trying to come up with something like relating to Aladdin and maybe like his first song of the film that can come up with like a name for this place. So if you have any really great ideas, definitely throw them in the comments because I am looking for a name for this one. But this is essentially Aladdin's home early on in the film. He lives on the outskirts of the market in a very rundown, abandoned building that he has repurposed into his space. I think according to patrons, and I haven't like checked out recently, the other Aladdin sequels that come out, there's a couple of like animated versions, straight to DVD type of vibes. They might show more of this place, or it was like formerly a family home because you do get to know some of Aladdin's family. So this is Aladdin's house. This was a complicated build for a few reasons. It's not actually shown very well in the movie at all. I did use the live action for reference because they do a wide shot of this place in the live action. So what I've created here is kind of like a combination of the very little that they do show in the animated and some elements of the live action version, while still keeping it true to like basically most of the shots that you get to see of this place are immediately following when Aladdin meets Jasmine and he takes her here. And so you can see how he gets here and like kind of like the general shape of the building and how high up he is as well. So that was like the primary reference for the build. However, I was able to find some art from Kingdom Hearts, I believe, that showed the inside in greater detail, and I also used that. And there are some more clips in the beginning of Aladdin where he's walking here, and it's very prevalent to me at least that he lives kind of like on the outsides of the market or on the like very outskirts of Agrabah in some of the most rundown and abandoned sort of buildings inside the city. So this has like way run down vibes. Like this is much more abandoned looking than the actual marketplace across the way. This building in the very front here is actually essentially an empty building. There's going to be some abandoned furniture, some run down vibes, and just not a lot going on. Like it's formerly someone's home, and the back building is primarily Aladdin's actual living space. He has chosen to live pretty much in the upper floors of this, and what makes it a really nice place to live actually is the view that you would get from this building. It's significantly taller than the surrounding ones, and it's almost like a tower. So you would have just this incredible view of the city, and that is shown in the film when he looks out of like one of his main windows. He can see the palace and just this sweeping landscape of Agrabah. So I definitely wanted to give that to him at the very least. This is a cluttered build. It is crowded. It is meant to be very small living, which is great. It's definitely something that's always needed for the save file. I do a lot of mansions and a lot of really big castle builds, so doing something that's a little bit more condensed, I'm always excited to take that on. Actually, something that I did this front building on today's build is stolen from the Agrabah marketplace. I went over there, picked one of the smaller, medium-ish sized buildings and copied it into my gallery and then took it over here just to keep the cohesiveness, the same colors. I've already picked out like the textures of the wallpapers and some of the decor in the windows and things, so I wanted to keep it super cohesive to the market across the way, and I needed that building kind of like as reference one. So that is actually a replica of one of the buildings I've already done. I added some things and changed it, like the window placement and the doors, and I added some platforms and things on top to give it a different vibe. You wouldn't even know that it's stolen from over there, but that's what I did just so that it keeps it cohesive. Now the thing about this build is Aladdin's actually not going to live here, but he could. So this is kind of a weirder idea for the save file, but something that I felt like I needed to do for the size of this world. I really wanted this lot to exist. I think having Aladdin's house somewhere creates a lot of playability, and my idea with the save file is always that you should be able to play most of a storyline from a Disney film from beginning to end. So I like to give all of the pieces and the spaces to be able to like fully go through a character's story. So he needed to have this home, and I wanted it available in this area. It's just something that I was excited about, and I knew I was going to do this immediately. And I could have had him living here. That would have been super easy. It's just a residential, no big deal. He lives here. The next video would have been his create-a-sim. But I think I'm trying to move him a little bit forward in the story in my head, because I hate doing really big castle builds or palace builds, for example, that might be coming up in the future, and having just like a couple Sims living there. I always feel kind of weird about that, like doing these absolutely massive builds and nobody lives there. So I kind of wanted to put him in the middle or end-ish of his story and move him in with some other characters to come to create a larger household. But then I really didn't know what to do with this lot. One thing that I don't really do with this save file is put in residentials that are unoccupied. They're usually something. They're either they have a family living there or they are occupied if they're a residential. So I didn't want to just leave it as a regular residential, so I ended up just doing a vacation rental. And I got some jokes from some patrons like, who would want to live here? But guess what? I would want to live here. I think that this is so cool. I love the view. I love this simple living. It's just like, I would stay here. I would vacation here. It gives a very specific vibe that I would absolutely love. So me. But outside of me, you can simply change it to be a regular residential if you would like to. You can change it to be a residential rental if you would like to, or if you wanted, you can change it so that you can move Aladdin back here and play the story from the beginning. Otherwise, it can be used for, you know, various other purposes. So I'm putting it as a vacation rental. The other reason being, I like to have, especially in these bigger worlds where we definitely have the space to do so, I like each world to have at least one vacation rental. The idea behind that is that none of the worlds are vacation places. I don't like this sort of like idea that The Sims has created with vacation spaces. There are places in the world that are very touristy and a lot of people go there every single year and it's like a tourist attraction, but people still live there. And for the people that live there, it's not a tourist attraction, it's their life and it's their livelihood and it's where they live. So I really like this idea that every single space in the Disney save is equally available to go and vacation to as it is somebody's home. So every world that I can possibly put a vacation rental into, I try to have at least one. And I've pretty much been successful with that across the board with the exception of those smaller worlds, particularly recently when I've done Tartosa and Sulani. Oh, actually Sulani does have one. So just when I've done Tartosa, and I think there's another one, Forgotten Hollow possibly doesn't have one because it's just too small to pull that off. But in Willow Creek, we have 21 Royal, which is based on Disneyland. Over in Mount Komorebi, I have the Arendelle Village, which you could obviously use for a residential rental at this point if you would like to, now that For Rent has been introduced, but the idea behind that was originally that it was a vacation rental. Hempford on Bagley has Mother Gothel's Cottage. Sulani has the Pirates of the Caribbean mini mansion. So there's lots of places like I wanted the idea that you could go anywhere to vacation, but also people live there to be very prevalent in all locations for the save file. So that's the idea behind this. That's ultimately why I made the decision to make this a rental, even though it's a little bit funny in concept. That does mean that the next video will not be a create-a-sim. It is going to actually be one of the lots, not the one immediately next to this one, but one space away. But that is a residential and it'll mark the first character from Aladdin that'll be coming to the save file. So you can expect one more build and then a create-a-sim to follow. I've already done that build and that one's really exciting. I know I keep saying that, but this one is unique. It's a new lot type. It is a residential, but it's like a specific one that I haven't brought to the save file so far, and it's for a very, very popular Aladdin character. Now, as far as today's build, some details that I want to point out. The scaffolding that I'm so excited about, I created on the side of this. That is something that is shown in the Aladdin market scenes very prevalently. It's all over the place. You've got this scaffolding and he climbs on top of it. He destroys another one. It's shown in the live action. It's something I wanted to have over in the market space, but the lot just wasn't quite big enough for me to pull that off. I could potentially copy that little like ensemble of what I've got going on and tool a version of it into the version that's going to go in the actual Disney save on the side of one of the buildings there, kind of like off lot a little bit, which I might be doing for sure. I'm going to be using tool on the market space just to add some things like kind of around the outside of that. So I could definitely do that. But in general, I still wanted to have the scaffolding. I feel like it's something that I like iconically remember from the film. So this was the definite appropriate place to put it. Now I can't use like actual ladders from the game and make it super functional because they don't work like that, and I can't tool them at weird angles and make them kind of slanted and leaning against the walls and the planks and stuff there. So I just pieced something together to just sort of like represent the idea of that. But in turn, this build does need to be functional. You need to think about how the sim is actually going to get in here. So the bottom floor is just open. You can go right in. There's a set of stairs that leads up to the second floor, and there's a ladder that leads up to the third floor. The third floor is where his build actually starts. His home begins. And then the fourth floor has an additional set of stairs and a ladder to get him up into the main bedroom, which is like that main room that you're going to think of from the movie at the tippy top of the tower, and where I had the best reference for. But because you're thinking about like this has to be functional and you have to create a kitchen space and a bathroom, I had to utilize some of those lower floors to put those spaces that we really don't see, but we're going to need to have it be there in order to actually use this build accurately. The more I was building here, the more I kept thinking that this would be a really, really great lot to do a rags to riches challenge or some kind of like a home makeover house flipper. So I wanted it to be like cracks in the wall, dirt on the floor, broken furniture, things here and there, but it almost sort of creates like this puzzle. You can see what the home was formerly supposed to be. You can tell where the bedroom once was. There are some leftover furniture pieces and some boarded off windows and things that you could repair over time with proper money and proper resources. You could have it be that like Aladdin and Jasmine move here and they decide to completely redecorate and rehaul. It could be post their movie. It could just be like an alternate storyline that you wanted to tell and have them just like redecorate this space and fully utilize it to its potential. It's ultimately like a really big build that could have a lot of intricate furniture and detailing and things like that. So I wanted to place some things down so you could see like this place was once something and it could be something really, really great again. And it had a life to it at one point. It's got some furniture, and Aladdin's space is actually more decorated and more lived in than the abandoned building in the front, because obviously he has acquired his own things over time and it's his house. So he's made it, you know, more livable and more correct for him. I can even picture him sort of like taking some things out of the surrounding buildings that he lives near to kind of piece together his own home, because obviously what we know about Aladdin is that he doesn't have a lot of money and he steals a lot of what he needs. So he would probably do things like that. And so having that abandoned furniture and those sorts of like details there that could be utilized in his space but in like future challenges as well, I felt like that made it really fun. It's a little dark in here with some of the lighting. I do try to keep it minimal for just like the aesthetic of the build, but I did put on some like overhead lighting just so that you guys could see in the decoration process. But then you'll notice at the end of the video with the screenshots, the actual spaces are a little bit darker than that because a lot of it is like lamp lighting and candle lighting, and it just doesn't light these indoor spaces super well. But his floor, like his main floor where he primarily lives, and you would remember from the film, that has really open archways and it's almost like crumbling stone and things like that where it's breaking away and it creates an archway that you can look out of. We only have so many options for me to be able to do something like that in place of actually using an archway. So you're gonna see me use like more archways than anything, because ultimately what I could have done was tear down some walls and then like piece together some stone around it to make it look like an archway, but it would create the outdoor lighting that I so despise and it just doesn't look very good. By deleting a wall and not closing off the room, the game treats it like an outdoor space and it wouldn't have given the full effect. So I've just pieced together a few archways. Those ones from werewolves definitely come in handy because they're the most like stony looking ones, even though that's kind of a weird pack for this build. And then as far as the main floor here with the balcony and the one that you'll remember from the film, I wanted to hit a couple of key points in here. I wanted it to be as accurate as possible to some of the references that I had available. Again, like I mentioned, I was able to find some official art that was, I think, from Kingdom Hearts that showed this room fully and made it really easy for me to replicate all of the details and get like a full view of how the space is supposed to look. But that one is drawn almost a little bit larger than what I had here, and one of the details it had is that Aladdin basically sleeps on like a set of stairs that go up to his open sort of archway, and that wasn't going to be functional like at all. You could place a bed there, but when you have multiple platforms and then you have the bed, I needed the space to be able to do that, and immediately I just didn't have it. I knew that this was going to be his bedroom and I wanted to have that multi-platform sort of look, but having that actually be the bed without doing some like glitchy sort of things, it wasn't going to work out. So I put a lot of pillows, a lot of like comfy items, some seating towards that area so that you could get the same sort of vibe. But I also needed to have a bed in here so that he could actually sleep, and that ends up going kind of like against the wall to the side. I also wanted a pet bed in here so that we could have a place for Abu. Obviously he is coming later down the line and he's going to be some sort of a pet, either a cat or a dog. Those are basically the only options we have available other than humanizing him, which I am sort of against for multiple reasons. This debate is really always kind of difficult, but the way that I think about it is if a character is an animal and they don't talk and they don't really have any majorly important moments where I would need to humanize them for that reason, I like to leave them as an animal, and specifically the closest possible version we have of an animal possible. So like some of the ones that I've humanized in the past are Timothy Mouse from Dumbo. He speaks in the movie, right? And he's kind of a main character, so I kind of have to humanize him. Mushu also comes to mind. He's very, very prevalent to the film's plot and he speaks lines. But then when we had like, I've already done a little bit of Tangled. I haven't dabbled in like everything that we're going to be doing for Tangled. That'll end up being in a future world. But I've thought about Pascal before. He was kind of hard and I still haven't solved that problem completely. He currently does not exist in the save file, but I knew I was not going to humanize him because he doesn't speak, and ultimately, as sad as it would be if you got rid of him from the movie, it wouldn't ultimately make a difference. But then the problem becomes I don't have a lizard, so what do I do to make Pascal exist in the save? And I've dabbled with like some cats and dogs and things, and it just wasn't my favorite thing I've ever created. But with Abu, we kind of have the same problem. He's not really a speaking person, and he is important in like the character sort of sense, but if he wasn't in the movie, it almost wouldn't make a difference with the exception of like one or two things. So I'm probably gonna cat or dogify him is what it comes down to, which means if you did want Aladdin and Abu to live here, he's gonna need a little pet bed, something that I did actually, and I hate the pet beds that come in cats and dogs. They're so flat, they look so boring, it doesn't make any sense. The way that like pet beds are in real life are very plush, they have rims around them usually. Obviously there's variations on pet beds, but the ones that we have are just so poorly done in my opinion, and I hate the way they look. So I wanted him to have like a basket that he could sleep in, and I used that trick that I very recently was doing in the Atlantis build from Tartosa, where I put the basket, we have like this debug basket, I think it is from the laundry pack, and I put it on the floor below and then actually raised it up so that it could be in line with the pet bed. That way the pet bed is still functional, but it is covered by the basket, and the game thinks that the basket is on the floor below, so you can still utilize it, but it looks like a basket. Hopefully that makes sense. You're gonna see it momentarily here. Another detail that was kind of a back and forth, and the most difficult part about this build is the clutter. I wanted there to be clutter, but you really have to think about what kind of clutter would Aladdin even have. The thing about his character is that he essentially has very little to nothing to his name. And when you see this place, you can see some of the stuff that's on shelves and walls, and a little bit more so shown in the live action. It's pots, a lot of them are broken. He might have some spices, he probably has candles, he probably has pillows and blankets and like some lighting, but you don't want to give him any major clutter, statues, anything that isn't seen as necessary. You don't want to do a lot of plants, you don't want to do anything super modern. You can't do anything food related either, like a basket of fruit or anything, because he essentially goes out to steal his meals daily and is barely making it by. So it wouldn't make sense if the clutter around this area, but the area downstairs that we're going to be doing momentarily, which is the kitchen, was food or food related or lots of expensive spices or anything like that. And I think he would have some things, right? Like he's a person and he's probably collected some things and he definitely goes out in the market and gets what he needs, right? But he wouldn't have anything crazy. So I had to figure out like what kind of clutter can I use that makes sense, that's not too modern, that fits the vibes, that isn't going to make no sense for Aladdin to be owning. The other unfortunate reality is he probably doesn't own anything very expensive or anything worth value, because if he did, he probably would have sold it already for food at various points in his life. So even if he has pots and pans and vases, they're probably cracked or crumbling and just not in the best condition. So that's something that I did keep in mind in here, and I strayed away from it like here and there a little bit. I can only feel so bad for the guy. He's obviously a really great character and it's a tough subject to even like try to step into, even inside of Disney. So what I'm saying is I didn't want him to have nothing, so I did give him some things, and hopefully it's all like mostly appropriate and makes sense for the story. Debug is always really good for this. A lot of the for rent clutter and pots and vases have been really good. They're stylistically correct in a lot of regards, so I did use a lot of that sort of thing for clutter. I also used some of the horses pack here. That pack comes with more like rundown furniture and some mops and barrels, things like that. And then we've got like lanterns as well that come from for rent, some basic game candles. And the bathroom was also a struggle. I almost completely forgot to do a bathroom. I knew that upstairs space that you know from the film is going to be the bedroom, and it's basically going to be set up exactly how the film shows it. And then I knew immediately down below that floor I was going to be doing the kitchen dining space and trying to like clutter it up and keep the vibes correct, but still not have it be too much, just like basic stuff. And then I was like, I'm done. And I was all wrapped up and ready to go. And then I remembered, oh yeah, he probably needs to have some kind of a bathroom. So the floor below this, I didn't want this like giant lavish bathroom, right? That doesn't make any sense. And originally I had like pre-decorated the space to be super abandoned and just like broken windows and maybe an old bathtub and nothing else. Again, kind of giving that idea that this was a space that was once someone's, and so it already kind of has a layout going to it. But now Aladdin needs to repurpose it for his own bathing purposes, so I had to redecorate at least part of that space downstairs to be a usable bathroom. So this ends up being a 1-bedroom, 1-bath with the potential of so much more. Lots of drapery around as well. That was definitely shown in a lot of the artwork. Having those extra boards that are definitely supporting the building, but in some regards are maybe like a little bit crooked, not lined up perfectly, so I couldn't utilize the actual like pieces that you would use in the game. You have to like kind of piece something together out of some debug wood and hanging the lanterns off of that or hanging the drapery off of that. It would be nice if a pack, something that I'm like kind of keeping a lookout for and so hopefully will be coming to The Sims at some point. I would love more cloth and more things that hang from the ceilings in general. It's so much better now than it used to be. We used to have like very few things at all, like some plants and pots and things, but the more the merrier. Things that hang from the ceiling at weird angles, the ribbons that we recently got, or streamers rather, from the party kit, stuff like that. I'm always looking for those types of things that I can put sort of up high to create more dimension that are not just plants but like pieces as well. As I mentioned in the last video, in comparison to the market, this build took me basically like a day, which is so nice, and I was really excited about it the whole time. I felt very creative when doing the entire thing. This is one of the reasons why I tend to keep movies together in groups, and I feel like it's a catch-22 because sometimes I know people get a little bit bored with the theming or the idea of something, so when I do a bunch of, let's say, Hercules builds and videos back to back to back, I think at a certain point people are ready to move on. But what it does for me as a builder is it lets me almost like register a set of items and an idea and themes and certain pieces that I used in the other builds, and it creates a very cohesive vibe between everything that I'm building. So where I had to figure out kind of like where my footing was with the Agrabah village and what I was going to use and how, like, what windows, what colors, what textures, those sorts of things, I already know when going into this build because it's so similar in aesthetics that I already knew what I could use, what I couldn't couldn't use, had ideas, and this ended up taking me a day. And then the next day I went and did the next build, which is not going to have anything to do with Agrabah. It is completely its own thing, but I already knew because I'm already in the vibe of Aladdin, if that makes sense. So that's why I keep movies together. It helps everybody feel cohesive and create a sim as well, because when I make one sim and I'm already doing Aladdin characters, I know how they're dressed and I can use the same packs and I can kind of make them feel like they come from the same place as they should. So more Aladdin to come. I have a residential coming up, our first character from Aladdin to join the save file, and then we'll be filling out this neighborhood with a few more Aladdin things. Nothing else market related. There's going to be some community spaces, so stay tuned for all of that. If you would like to support the Disney Save on Patreon, you can do so by clicking the link in my description box down below or the one at the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and I will talk to you all in the next one.